CrossFit Youth. Welcome to cross training this week. Sorry, I'm one day late on it, but we're going to get it tonight. I want to start by giving y'all an update. For the rest of the month of August, we have went to online services only for church. So just know that for the rest of the month, online only, and if you will just stay tuned toward the end of August, we'll have some more information about that and what we'll do going forward. I do know this. I'm just like y'all. I've seen several of you around town. I've talked to several of you, text with a few of you, and I know that y'all are missing our cross-training services on Wednesday nights, and Rebecca and I are missing those as well. We miss all of y'all and being able to hang out with y'all and interact with y'all on Wednesday nights and everything that we do. We can't wait till the time that we can get back together and do that again, and hopefully that will not be long. So stay tuned for some announcements on that. So if you've tuned into the last 2 weeks' lessons, you'll know that we started a new Word of Life series called Man Alive, and we're speaking about the doctrine of man and the doctrine of sin. And we talked a little bit about Adam and Eve and the creation and how things were in the beginning and how things kind of took a turn to sort of lead up to where we are today in the world. But tonight, our lesson is called Light for a Dark World. Light for a Dark World. And the sticky statement for the next couple of weeks' lessons is stay close to the light. Now, I don't know. We'll kind of see how this goes. I don't know if we will split this lesson up into 2 Wednesday night lessons or possibly even 3. So I'm trying not to keep these videos quite as long as they were for a little while. I know that y'all can focus a little better and I can hold your attention a little better with a little shorter time span. So I understand that. I do. So that's what we're going to try to do with these next few lessons. So I'm just going to get right into the lesson here. Going to be doing a lot of reading tonight. This is one of those lessons I feel like is written very well. So I'm going to pretty much stick to the text here. So listen up. On November the 5th, 2017, Devin Patrick Kelly began his mass shooting outside First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs, Texas. After killing 2 people outside of the church, he entered into the building and opened fire on the congregation, leaving 23 more people dead and many others injured. What a way to start a lesson, right? After a police chase, Kelly lost his own life when he wrecked his vehicle. Later that day, another person died at the hospital as a result of a gunshot wound inflicted by Kelly. When the massacre was over, 27 people had lost their lives. That's terrible. The despicable actions of one person resulted in the suffering of many people. People in that church and in the surrounding community in Texas suffered much loss and pain that still impacts their lives today. Man Alive, to use the title of this lesson series, Man Alive, what is wrong with our world? We see this happening periodically throughout our country, and not only in our country, but across the face of the earth. So in these lessons, we're talking about the brokenness of the world, the brokenness in the lives of human beings and in the world as a whole. In our first lesson, we learned that sin entered the world through a rebellious choice of Adam and Eve. And as a result, all of mankind has suffered the effects of their sinful choices. So we see that trickle-down effect where when bad things happen and when people sin and when people do bad things, it always has a result not only for their lives but for the lives of the people around them and that come after them. Ever since that first sin, there's a darkness that seems to have filled our world. When horrific shootings like the one in Sutherland Springs, Texas takes place, that darkness seems to be at its deepest shade of black. When despicable acts like this happen, it's pretty easy to recognize just how dark our world is, ain't it? But have you ever stopped to evaluate why you recognize these terrible acts as dark? Why is it that when school shootings happen, or when a drunk driver kills a family, or when someone is molested, why is it that those events are seen as wrong or evil, even by those who don't follow Jesus, even by those people who don't believe in the God of the Bible? Have you ever thought about that? Why do people see those acts as dark or bad or wrong or even evil? People that don't even believe in God call these evil acts. The answer to that question has everything to do with the light. You see, when you know about light, you can recognize darkness, right? Light exposes darkness every time. Now, if I was in this room right now without any light in it, then it would be obvious that there was darkness, because we know what the light does, what kind of effect the light has, right? And we know that if there's light, you'll be able to see. Have you ever tried to do something in the dark? Like, I'll go outside sometimes after dark because I realize, I didn't give the dog his food. So I'll go out the back door, and if I try to go out there, especially this being a new place in a new yard, and me, maybe forgetting that something is somewhere in the yard, and it's pitch black dark outside, and if I try to go out there to that shed where I've got the dog food, and I try to feel my way, because there's no light in that shed, if I try to feel my way around and get that dog food and walk back up to the dog house and put it in the pan and take it back out there, without any light, that would be extremely hard for me to do. So I've got this little headlamp with a flashlight on the front of it that fits around my head, or a hat or something, and I put that thing on and I turn it on, and that gives me the light that I need to get out there and get the job done that I went out there to do. Or how many of you have ever been told by your parents, trash pickup is tomorrow, go put the trash can by the road? And it's pitch black dark outside. And how many of you go out there and you stand there at the front door and you focus your eyes and you try to spot that trash can, and then you kind of look to clear yourself a path, try to see how you can get out there, and the quickest way to get out there and get back without tripping over something or getting hurt. And you run out there and you grab that trash can and you get it to the road as fast as you can, and then you turn around and you head back, and what happens? Every evil monster you've ever seen in a scary movie is chasing behind you, right? Because you can't see nothing. You don't know what's back there, and in your mind, you're being chased by some angry monster, and you hightail it back to the house. I know I've done that before. So think about a time when you tried to do something in the dark. Do you know why you think that doing those tasks in the dark are hard or scary? It's because you've done those same tasks in the light. And you know the effect that light has. Again, light exposes or casts out darkness. It drives that darkness away. And it exposes you to things that you can see that you could not see or even understand in the dark. But what would happen if you lived in complete darkness? What do you think life would be like if you had to live in complete darkness? What if you had never seen light before? Well, the Bible gives an account of the life of a man who only knew darkness. The book of John is a record of an eyewitness account of the events in the life of Jesus. And it's an account that we can learn some things not only about physical light and darkness, but also the spiritual darkness that's in our world. So let's go look at that passage. The book of John, chapter 9, we're going to read the first 7 verses. So I'm going to get out my Bible.is app here, and I've got it already on John, not 1 John, 2 John, or 3 John, but the Gospel of John. New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. 4th book in the New Testament. John chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. So I'm going to read those. And he, Jesus, passed by, and he saw a blind man from his birth. He was blind from the time he was born. Remember that little snippet of information. He was blind since birth. And the disciples asked him, Rabbi, that means teacher, who sinned? This man that's blind or his parents that caused him to be born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned, nor his parents, but so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me, in other words, God the Father, while it is day. In other words, while there is light. Because night is coming when no one can do works. The darkness. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground, and he made mud with his saliva. We'll talk about that a little more probably next week. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, now go wash it off in the pool of Siloam. So he went and he washed, and he came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar, a blind beggar, were saying, isn't this the man that used to sit and beg, the blind man? And some people said, it is him. But others said, no, he just looks like him. But he kept saying, I am the man. Now, blind from birth, never seen the light of day. All he had ever known was darkness. And there was something in him that longed for, that wanted the light. As we read these verses, we notice that he wasn't the only one who recognized that something wasn't normal in his life. In the middle of the passage, the disciples asked a very interesting question. What's interesting about the question is in the incorrect assumptions that were made that the disciples questions. Now, the first assumption is rather obvious. The disciples assumed that his blindness was a result of a particular person's sin. Now, it's incorrect to assume that all suffering is a result of a particular person's sin. That's incorrect. That is wrong. When you try to pin someone's suffering on a particular person's sin, we cannot do that. That's incorrect. But we'll talk about that a little more the next couple of weeks. The other incorrect assumption is a little more subtle than that. Now, I'm going to read the question that they asked again, and I just want you to think about this. I'm not going to give you the answer tonight, maybe next week, but I want you to think about this. What is this more subtle second incorrect assumption about their questions and comments? So here's the question again. Who sinned, this man or his parents that caused him to be born blind? I want you to think about that one. Now, let's talk about the third incorrect assumption, or the third assumption that they made. It was not incorrect. It was correct. You're not supposed to be born blind. That's an abnormal thing. That's not the way that it's supposed to happen. So why did the disciples make that assumption? That he wasn't supposed to be blind. Something was off. Something was wrong for him to be blind. Why did they make that assumption? They made it because they knew what it was like to see. They made that assumption because in their minds, it's not a normal thing to be blind. No doubt, even the blind man had made this assumption too. Obviously, there were a lot of people around him that could do something that he could not do, the blind man. They could see, and he could not. And the blind man knew it, and everyone around him knew it. Even though the blind man had never experienced light, he had never experienced sight, he knew from the witness of others that something wasn't right. You see, it is our knowledge of light that helps us recognize the darkness. But as the disciples would find out, this man's blindness had a greater purpose. So why? Why did this man have to suffer? It's a great question. It's a logical question. When we think about a lot of the suffering that we see or that we experience, it's a logical question to ask. Why do people have to suffer? Why did the people in Sutherland Springs, Texas have to suffer? Let's get a little more personal. Why, in times of your life that you've had to suffer in one way or another, in some light form or some heavy form, why do you have to suffer? It's a great thing to try to find out the answer to, because many people don't know the answer to that question. Well, first of all, me nor this lesson has all of the answers for every difficulty that you might face, or that someone else might face, or that I might face. Nobody has all the answers to that, okay? And this lesson may not answer every single question that you may have about suffering. But I think by the time we're done with these lessons, you will have a greater understanding of, first of all, why they're suffering, and second of all, why people have to endure suffering. There's no way that anybody should assume to know what you're feeling when you're suffering in your life, or anyone else, because everyone's life is different. I can't assume that I know exactly what you're going through when you're going through a hard time. When someone loses a parent to death, I can understand that to a certain extent, because I can picture in my mind or think about how I would feel in that situation, but I haven't experienced that. So there's no way that you can completely understand the way someone feels about the suffering that they're going through in a particular time that they're going through. So I want you to understand that you may understand to a certain extent, but everyone's life is different. So we need to be able to listen to people and try to understand how they're affected by the suffering, and we can help them in that way. So there's no way that we should assume to know what anyone is feeling or how you've been unfairly treated. But I do know someone who cares for you more than you can imagine. The good news is that He has given us His Word to help us in the middle of our trouble. From beginning to end, all the way through, first to last, when we're going into trouble and when we're coming out of that thing. He's given us His Word to help us get through that. It's in the Word of God that we can help. It's in the Word of God that we can find help for our hurting souls. So we're going to look back into His Word, and we're going to see if we can find some answers to our own questions about suffering in the next couple of weeks. So the passage that we read earlier gives us some insight to how suffering happens and how we can get through that and why suffering happens to some of us. And the first point of next week's lesson, because this is where we're going to end tonight's lesson, is where does suffering come from? Where does it come from? You will want to tune in next week to hear the continuation of this lesson to find out where suffering comes from. And then, not sure if it'll be next week or the next, but our next point will be, if I can find it, where can I find help for my suffering? So that's what we're going to talk about the next week or maybe 2 weeks. Where does suffering come from? And where can I find help for my suffering? So that's it for tonight. Thank y'all for joining me again this week. I love every one of y'all. Me and Miss Rebecca miss y'all, and we can't wait to see you again. Keep in touch with us. Give us a shout out through a text or a Facebook message or Instagram. Post some pictures to us. Snapchat us. We've got all those apps. So we love interacting with y'all, and we hope that you have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Love y'all.